Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing our Uniting the North series with episode 4, titled Brother Against Brother. Now, we ended our last episode as we discussed Yuan Shang's attempt to open up a new front in Hedong in order to alleviate the pressure from Cao Cao's siege at Ye. But unfortunately, due to the efforts from the likes of Du Ji and Zhong Yao, Gao Gan's attempt at taking over Hedong ended in failure. Despite this, Cao Cao retreated suddenly, and rumors started to circulate that Cao Cao was planning on attacking Liu Biao instead of continuing the siege in the north. Confused and relieved, Yuan Tan and Yuan Shang didn't waste any time to start plotting against one another, as neither of them knew that Cao Cao's retreat and false rumors of the attack on Liu Biao were both ploys by Guo Jia. And right away, Yuan Tan seized upon this opportunity and offered to lead an attack on the retreating Cao Cao army before they crossed the Yellow River, on the condition that Yuan Shang resupply his army with brand new armor, as most of their current armor are badly damaged from the prior engagements at Liyang. Yet, much like how he previously refused to provide Yuan Tan any reinforcements out of fear that his older brother would one day turn on him, Yuan Shang once again dismissed his brother's demands and instead ordered him to return with his troops back to his assigned land of the Qing province. And since Yuan Shang inherited his father's titles and thus had the right to command him, Yuan Tan grudgingly marched his army out of Ye. But before he got far, his two main advisors, Guo Tu and Xin Pi, stopped him and attempted to convince their master to rebel and seize power from Yuan Shao. Xin Pi and Guo Tu argued that the will from Yuan Shao made no sense, as it stated that Yuan Tan had actually been passed on to his dead uncle Yuan Ji's line to make sure Yuan Ji's branch of the family does not end, as Yuan Ji's entire clan was executed by Dong Zhuo following Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu's stance against Dong Zhuo. Then, because now the eldest son has been passed over, the two remaining sons in Yuan Xi and Yuan Shang are neither the eldest son, so technically there is no more tradition, and based on merit, Yuan Shang was picked to inherit. And this just made little sense, as if this was the case, then Yuan Xi should have been the one to be passed over to begin with. So clearly they have been wronged, and this will must be a fake, and probably is the work of Shen Pei, whose clan has firm control over the city of Ye. Agreeing with his advisors, Yuan Tan turned his army around and began to attack Yuan Shang's forces. But with much fewer men, low supplies, and no siege weapons to take on the massive walls protecting Ye, Yuan Tan's forces were soon beaten back and forced to flee north towards the city of Nanpi within the Pingyuan commandery in order to recover. Hearing this news, Yuan Tan's own officials from the Qing province in Wangxiu, who had previously worked for Kong Rong, rushed to Yuan Tan's side with reinforcements, and also calming words as he warned Yuan Tan of the severe consequences for the entire north should the two brothers wage all-out war against one another. And Wangxiu would go on to compare Yuan Tan and Yuan Shang as two arms of the same person. Even if one arm manages to break off the other, all you're left with is a cripple. And with the whole world watching, if the Yuan clan cannot even tolerate family, then how can they be trusted to tolerate others as potential allies and talents to work for them, as they will certainly avoid them and seek employment elsewhere with others such as Cao Cao. And certainly, all of China were watching closely, as even Liu Biao hastily wrote a letter to both Yuan Tan and Yuan Shang, urging calm and peace between the two of them, as any conflict between them would only benefit Cao Cao and plunge the Han into the abyss. But the relationship was ready at a point of no return, as Yuan Shang also decided to continue to push his advantage, as he would march his forces out of Ye to lay siege to Yuan Tan's forces at Nanpi, hoping to eliminate them once for all to cement his own leadership in the north. With Yuan Tan under siege and appearing in trouble, Many of his officials within the Qing province started to abandon ship as they preemptively started to join Yuan Shang, hoping to earn themselves enough good grace with the future ruler of all of the north. But in reality, Yuan Tan was down, but not out, as he still had a few loyal officers, and one lone administrator in Guantong from the Donglai commandery would actually abandon his own wife and kids to march what little army he had left in Donglai to help reinforce Yuan Tan in Nanpi. However, all this was for naught, as Nanpi would soon fall, and Yuan Tan would flee with what little force he had left deeper into Pingyuan as he prepared to make his last stand against Yuan Shang. Then in this darkest hour, Yuan Tan's advisor, Xin Pi, who was the younger brother of Xin Ping, offered an unimaginable plan to save them from complete destruction. Xin Pi suggested to Yuan Tan to surrender to Cao Cao and offered to become Cao Cao's vassal in order to have Cao Cao's forces come rescue them from Yuan Shang. Out of desperation, and really with no other option, Yuan Tan begrudgingly agreed, as he decided to send Xin Pi to represent him to negotiate with Cao Cao. Yet when Xin Pi arrived at Cao Cao's court, he did not immediately plead for reinforcements to save Yuan Tan, as instead, he provided a very detailed analysis of the current situation in the north, describing the various powers at play, including Gao Gan, Yuan Tan, Yuan Xi, and Yuan Shang. Then following his full analysis, Xin Pi begged Cao Cao to use this opportunity to attack the thinly defended city of Ye and take the entire north for himself instead of wasting time and manpower to save Yuan Tan in Pingyuan. Clearly betraying his master, Xin Pi came to Xuchang not to save Yuan Tan, but to save his own neck, as he wanted to earn himself a place with the side that he believed will become the ultimate winner. And since Xin Pi and his older brother Xin Ping were also from the famous Xing gentry clan of Yingchuan, they naturally had the support from the likes of Xun Yu, Xun You, Guo Jia, and Zhong Yao, who were all from the same commandery, and more than happy to vouch for another one of their homeboys from the Yinchuan commandery to Cao Cao. So Cao Cao happily accepted Xin Pi as one of his new advisors, as he kept him with his army, and heeding his advice, Cao Cao's army began marching for Ye, as no one, not even Xin Pi, would return to save Yuan Tan. But luckily for Yuan Tan, Yuan Shang was still rational, as news of Cao Cao's mobilization quickly reached the north, as Yuan Shang quickly abandoned the siege and rushed his army back to Ye in order to attempt to save it from Cao Cao's advances. But it was still too late, as Cao Cao's armies already had the time to set up the siege around the city of Ye. And not wanting to meet Cao Cao in an open field, Yuan Shang opted to retreat north instead towards the Zhongshan commandery in order to preserve his force for the time being and observe the situation around Ye. Now at the same time, not knowing all the details, Yuan Tan at first believed this was all part of the plan to save him, but he was still unsure about the whole arrangement, as Cao Cao had always been his enemy. So when two of Yuan Shang's officers in Yuxiang and Yu Kuang decided to surrender to Cao Cao ahead of the siege at Ye, Yuan Tan secretly offered both of them general seals to tempt them over to work for him instead. But unbeknownst to Yuan Tan, his secret attempt to sway these officers would actually be found out by Cao Cao. But at this point, Cao Cao did not want to deal with Yuan Tan, as he was very focused on the city of Ye. So in an effort to appease Yuan Tan for the time being and delay any potential backstabbing from him, Cao Cao offered an arranged marriage between his son, Cao Zheng, and Yuan Tan's daughter. Now this is just an arrangement at the time, and not an actual marriage, because Cao Zheng was just 7. So the true purpose of setting up this marriage was to have Yuan Tan send his daughter, who was also around Cao Zheng's age, to Xuchang as a political hostage. And in addition to the marriage arrangement, Cao Cao would also use the imperial edict to officially name Yuan Tan as the prefect of the Qing province, to assure him that everything he had before will still be his after joining Cao Cao. Now, with Yuan Tan appeased for the time being, and Yuan Shang still observing the situation in Zhongshan, The outlook for Ye looked pretty desperate. But as much as you can fault Xin Pi for his clan's corruption or for his participation in the falsifying of Yuan Shao's will, he was still very much loyal to the Yuan clan. And to the very end, he decided that he was going to go down with the city of Ye, as he withstood waves and waves of assault despite being undermanned. With the siege officially starting in April of 204, it was a disaster from the start, as more and more officials started to flip on the Yuan clan, as all signs pointed towards their destruction. First, Shen Pei's second in command, Su You, secretly plotted with Cao Cao to open the gates when Cao Cao's army first arrived. But fortunately, Shen Pei was able to discover this early enough to prevent any real damages, as Su You escaped the city and joined Cao Cao's side. Then Cao Cao left the command of the siege to his younger cousin Cao Hong, as he would lead a smaller force targeting nearby cities and supply routes, as Cao Cao knew taking Ye by force would be way too costly, so cutting off its supplies would be a much easier way. And while Cao Cao was busy cutting off the supply lines into Ye, Cao Hong busied himself with the siege. At first, he relied on the traditional siege tactic of the time, which was to construct dirt ramps to scale the city walls, but all attempts failed. Then an opportunity presented itself as one of Shen Pei's officers named Feng Li offered to open the city gate at night for Cao Hong's forces, but just as 300 vanguard forces entered the city, their attempts were discovered by the night patrol. That under Shen Pei's command, the guards on the wall quickly redirected the rocks prepared for the siege towards the inside of the city as they were tossed quickly over the city gate to obstruct the opening. And after blocking the gate with rocks, the stranded 300 vanguard unit were quickly eliminated within the city. And as the second month of the siege rolled around, Cao Cao would finally return, signifying that all the nearby cities have fallen, meaning that any resupply would now have to come from farther away. While this would greatly increase the difficulty of resupplying the city, it was still possible, as Cao Cao simply did not have the manpower necessarily to fully blockade a city of Ye's size, as the city perimeter was probably close to 30 kilometers long. So seeing that Cao Hong's dirt ramp attempts have not been working, Cao Cao decided to switch up the tactics, as his army now busied themselves digging up a ditch surrounding the whole city, totaling over 40 kilometers in length. Now at first, Shen Pei laughed at Cao Cao's feeble attempt at isolating the city, as the ditch was shallow and narrow. So in order to preserve his small force and not falling for any traps, he didn't make any attempt at sallying out the city to halt the construction of this ditch. But just as the ditch was completed, Cao Cao started digging massive irrigation canals from nearby rivers towards this ditch, as the mighty flow of the rivers flooded the ditch, widening it and creating this natural impassable moat, isolating Ye. And now isolated and cut off from future resupplies, Ye stands alone. And with that, we're going to end our episode here, as Yuan Tan and Yuan Shang's infighting finally presented Cao Cao with this opportunity to take down the city of Ye, and thus opening the way to uniting the entire north. But even with Ye surrounded and cut off, Shen Pei continued to lead a fierce resistance, as the siege of Ye will continue in our next episode. So hopefully you all enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!